Hi everyone, I have a huge announcement. We are thrilled to unveil our biggest update since launching Piclo Flex 5 years ago. Quite simply, this is going to revolutionize energy and flexibility markets globally. But first, a bit of background. Since 2018, our Piclo Flex marketplace has been bringing together flexibility buyers and sellers to solve one of the fastest growing challenges in the energy transition: bottlenecks on the distribution and transmission grids. Grid operators have been using our platform to procure flexibility from flex sellers, the organizations who own and operate flexible assets, such as EVs, renewables, batteries, and more. We've been very successful at helping grid operators transform their organizations from passive infrastructure managers into dynamic, smart grid operators. Our marketplace, now adopted by grid operators across 6 countries, has become the standard for local flexibility markets.
But there is more potential to unlock. Hundreds of organizations who manage their flexibility assets find it challenging to navigate all these markets. Flexibility sellers currently have to access multiple market platforms. For instance, they have to go to Piclo Flex for local flex contracts, and a different platform for wholesale, and others for capacity or balancing. On top of this, every country has a different set of market platforms and protocols. In order to be successful, flexibility sellers have to become highly proficient in the varying rules, and with these complexities, placing a huge burden on their time. This limits participation and competition across the industry. If we tackle this problem head-on, flexibility has a chance to lower costs and speed up the energy transition, and that's where Piclo comes in.
We're proud to unveil Piclo Max, our market access platform that enables flex sellers to access all flexibility and energy markets in a single place. This is revolutionary, a world first. Piclo Max does the hard work of integrating with every market, simplifying and standardizing the interface for flex sellers. Instead of signing up to hundreds of different platforms and portals, flex sellers can access everything in one single place. Piclo Max gives flex sellers the opportunity to maximize the value of their assets across markets, all through a seamless and efficient experience. We believe that prioritizing value for the flex seller is key, and with that in mind, our vision is to simplify and unlock energy market access for all buyers and sellers of flexibility. Starting in the UK, our plan is to provide access across global energy and flexibility markets in 2024 and beyond.
We're very excited about this new chapter in energy and flexibility markets, but where do we start? Well, of course, in harmonizing access to local flexibility markets. I'm excited to announce that with Piclo Max, for the first time, you'll be able to access all UK local flex markets. And this is only the beginning. We hope you are as excited as we are and want to join us in the journey. Please register your interest and help us shape the future of flexibility and energy markets.
Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Caroline Bragg. I'm the Interim Chief Executive of the Association for Decentralised Energy, a trade association representing flexibility service providers and platforms like Piclo. And we're here today to discuss Piclo's new offering, Piclo Max. So let's get started. Mike, do you want to tell us a little bit about what Piclo Max is and why it's different from where you've been in the market thus far?
Sure, thanks. So Piclo Max, or Market Access, is our product that brings together all of the energy markets in the UK. So specifically for flex providers, allowing them to access in one place all of the markets that they would like to trade in or participate in. From the flex provider perspective, what's really exciting about this is that you can bring these markets together and stack them and be able to participate in them as much as possible. So that's let's say a benefit for flex providers when they're trying to engage these markets today, which may be in a disaggregated or fragmented access route. From the system operator perspective, who are also our clients here, this brings enhanced participation from the market, which is clearly a major objective in the market in making sure that the optimum participation is there to liquefy our energy markets, as it were.
Oh, nice. I mean, can you say a little bit more? I mean, obviously, Piclo is already working with a number of different DNOs, for example, and you've got the local constraint market as well. In terms of how far you think this is going to ease access, could you say a little bit more about it? I mean, is it to help with the administration of getting into some of these markets, or do you think actually you can go further than that?
Let me start with the position where we are in the market today in the UK, and then I'll pass to James to maybe say a little bit more broadly. So as it stands today in the UK, we access 4 DSOs or DNOs, and we also access the local constraint market with the ESO. Moving forward, we're going to unlock access to all of the DSO markets, so from 4 to 6, and we're also looking to unlock further energy markets like wholesale market and further ESO markets in 2024. So as it stands today, our flex providers would be accessing the 4 markets in one place and then other markets via other mechanisms. So from from an administrative burden, of course, there is some separation in how it exists today. But moving forward, then that will be simplified and in one place. It also then allows the flex providers to look at more than one opportunity from different markets in one place. So that also simplifies their let's say, ability to stack revenues or to make choices around which markets they participate in. And that's just the UK. That's where we are today.
When I think about Piclo Max and how we really think this is revolutionary, I think back to 5 years ago when we launched Piclo Flex. And I think the context back then was very interesting. We had distribution network operators starting to think about how they had to procure flexibility as part of at this point, relatively new obligations from the regulator. And the problem that we had was there was a lack of visibility, there was a lack of standardization, and these markets didn't really exist. Yes, DNOs were running their own ad hoc procurement routes, and you could actually technically access all these things, but there was just not a critical mass around this. And it didn't really exist as a concept, and we made it a concept. We brought it to life. And that's how we view Piclo Max as being this next evolution of the overall flex market. I would say there isn't really a flex market here today. There's a whole series of bilateral arrangements. When you add it all together, you need to be proficient in speaking 15, 20, 25 different languages, as it were, to access all of this. There are a whole number of market design rules and processes that need to be optimized by the regulator and by the system operators. But I would say up to 50% of the challenge is actually the lack of access in a transparent, standardized way. And we really think that this will create the flex market.
I mean, it's interesting you talk about that, because I guess what we've seen over the last year or so is that Ofgem probably thinks the same at this point, right? We've had lots of discussions about a new market facilitator role to be kind of bringing these markets together. We've had lots of discussions about a flex exchange to support secondary markets and greater trading between markets. Do you think, I mean, in some ways, are you sort of slightly preempting what the regulator is trying to do?
We agree with the market failures that Ofgem has recognised, inability to easily stack revenues and lack of coordination between these markets. We 100% agree with their analysis. We view there needs to be 2 key threads that need to be progressed here. One is the market facilitation role, which we know Ofgem is moving forwards with. I think this is very exciting. It's very important that this role exists so it can actually start to harmonise and set standards and interoperability requirements across all these different markets, sort out primacy rules, sort out some of the market design rules, exclusivity and all these different elements. That's absolutely critical. And then alongside that, we need to work out some of the digital architecture stuff. And this is what Ofgem have been surfacing in one of their recent call for inputs around the flexibility exchange, or there's a number of names for it now. I think it's evolved now to the flexibility digital infrastructure. And I think what they're saying is there's a need for some digital infrastructure here. Our answer is there's actually quite a lot of this which can get built in the commercial space by innovators like Piclo. There's nothing stopping us doing this. We see that there's a challenge from our flex providers in accessing all these markets. So we're going to go ahead and build services and tools that can help solve some problems. Now, what we believe is there will be probably a small amount of residual digital infrastructure which we cannot provide because it needs to be sort of centralized by the industry and run by and owned by the industry, probably administered by the market facilitator. But actually we think there's a huge amount of value in us just getting going with building quite a lot of this stuff which can just exist in the commercial sphere. And then we can work out what those small pieces are as we go. And we will surface in our, as we do this, where there are clear wins if we can get some common industry stuff together.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess it raises the point about what you think you might find actually as this product develops. I guess the extent to which there are substantive barriers to standardization, for example, and where we need to go. I mean, can I ask you, from a flex provider's perspective, obviously we have lots of different people in the market, and actually what we've seen with new services coming forward, like demand flexibility service, a lot of new entrants into the market. Obviously, people are competing on the basis on their knowledge of the markets, their ability to kind of, in some respects, get over some of the, what I would also agree is kind of unnecessary barriers to participation at the minute, but also on their ability to take risk and read the market. Where do you think you kind of, I guess you see yourself in terms of how this might change people's market offerings?
So I think the key thing that we think about with market access is that it will increase competition, and that's a good thing. And ultimately, if this, the long-term vision is this increases competitions both on the flex seller side and the flex buyer side. Now, I'll come back to the flex buyer side in a second, but flex seller side, there's a huge amount of locked up flexibility in the system that needs route to market, needs providers, needs different types of organizations to exist to provide that, to aggregate that up. And we see it as, one of the key drivers for us is actually providing a standardized route to market and create that competitive sphere, which I think is very exciting. And I think for the existing incumbent flex providers, if we do this right, then the overall size of the pie will grow and everyone will benefit. So I think it's about growing the size of the flex pie and then creating more opportunities for more competition as well. And then on the flex buyer side, at the moment, there are a small, relatively small number of flexibility buyers or markets, as they're known, and obviously the distribution network operators that we're familiar with, and the ESO's got a number of different markets and wholesale. But where does this go in the long term? It really, it's up to grabs, for grabs how this market evolve. And we're starting to see this not in flexibility right now, but in the renewable trading space with corporate power purchase agreements, this more peer-to-peer type model between businesses accessing and directly interacting with the market. We see that type of more peer-to-peer type model actually coming into the flexibility space as well. And again, this comes down to the right market design to unlock this. But we see the opportunity for anyone can create their own flexibility product, essentially, that they can look to buy or sell on the platform.
Which leads us on to, I guess one of the things I did really want to talk about with this is obviously we have just had Ofgem confirm the modification P415, which is all about the idea that those who are not suppliers or registered generators can participate directly in the wholesale market in a very similar way to what we now have in the balancing mechanism through wider access and virtual lead parties. Obviously that creates this really interesting situation where for the first time flexibility service providers that you're targeting will be able to directly trade their flexibility peer-to-peer in the wholesale markets. How much of a bearing has that had on your decision to move to this type of arrangement?
It's very timely. I think we view, there's still several months before this gets unlocked later on next year. But we view this as being hugely important for our flex service providers. Lowering those barriers to accessing a major new revenue stacking opportunity, which previously is only been really accessible by licensed suppliers and generators. So we think it's an amazing opportunity, and I think the key thing, again, the key design principle that we're putting into Piclo Max is there's going to be new markets and new opportunities develop over time. We've got the P415 opportunity coming next year. What's the next one after that? And we're designing for that uncertainty. So we're designing a key kind of part of the platform is we've got essentially this core toolkit of services across market qualification, bidding, operations, settlement, payments that can be essentially are market agnostic and can provide the same entry point, the same standardized set of tools to access whatever type of market. And that's how we're thinking about it. It's designing for change, as it were, designing for new things.
And if I can add, I think alongside the advent of P415, which unlocks participation in this market from flex providers or aggregators, what's exciting is that we're then bringing along with that, as James mentioned, the advent of a simplification to access that market. So rather than having to do that in multiple places through multiple interfaces or designs, there should be a simple way to be able to stack that all together. And we're hoping that the Piclo Max product brings that.
I mean, we are in such a period of uncertainty at the minute in the electricity market. So, I mean, I think it's interesting because I guess you could say, looking at this, perhaps it's a punt towards there might even be a greater diversity of flexibility markets in the future, whereas I think lots of people have seen the review of electricity market arrangements as in part trying to simplify and consolidate the markets that we have at the minute, at least around constraint management, for example, back into the wholesale market and return to a slightly simpler market structure. I mean, what would you say to that? Do you think this is resilient to wherever REMA goes, or are you taking a punt towards a more incremental outcome?
I think one of the other kind of key principles we're designing for is decentralization is the way the market is likely to be headed. The way I think about it, if you were to ask British Telecom or the Post Office back in the 1960s, what are you going to do about these telephone exchanges? They would say, well, we need to invest in smarter, less manual, more technologies. They wouldn't be talking about we need a completely decentralized digital internet. That wouldn't be part of the vocabulary. And I think that's part of the challenge we have right now is the mindset of centralization essentially, I think, belongs in the analog world where we had a couple of hundred power stations, synchronous machines, so analog systems, powering the system, and it's not the right mental model for a world where you've got millions of digital devices, batteries, electric vehicles, solar inverters, solar panels, that are everywhere on the network, where you have, we've seen this as we've been running these markets, where you have thousands of bottlenecks at any one point in time on the network, and potentially, tens or hundreds of thousands in the future, where the whole concept that you can bring all of this into a central algorithm to control everything just becomes quite artificial in terms of a dream. So we are designing for the fact that they're probably the best approach is more incremental. Now, what we don't want to happen is that the increased complexity inherent of a more decentralized system creates additional barriers, that complexity then gets pushed back onto the providers, who then have even more harder task of trying to navigate all this stuff. And that's why we think there needs to be innovations like what we're developing with Piclo Max, that sort of strip away that complexity, whatever level it is. It could be every single every single organization, every single business in the country could be a flex buyer. But if you design that market access layer right, then only the opportunities are relevant to that particular flex provider are surfaced up to them in a consumable way. So that's what we are, that's an underlying principle we're driving forward with.
But I think also, just to add there, what's really important for the aggregate system is not only the balance in the system at whatever junction, but also the optimum price that's delivered to the end consumer. And the way to optimize those things are to have the maximum amount of participation, which means bringing as many assets as possible into the ecosystem, from as small to as large. And then the second is competition. And so resilient to these sort of changes in the market are making sure that the right competition and participation are in place. And we're hoping through the Max platform that by bringing these opportunities together, we at first potentially simulate, but then actually execute a system where all these markets are brought together.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, say, if you were to play devil's advocate, one of the counters to that, for example, might be, where the energy systems Catapult has been for some time, actually, which is that we need quite significant retail reform and the type of organisations able to take merchant risk, actually, on renewable electricity, which, in many respects, I think we and others have read as a consolidation, actually, of the electricity market and a resolving of where we're at, I guess, at least at the minute, in terms of the different roles between flexibility aggregators and the suppliers, firmly in favour of the suppliers. At least that would be the view, I guess, of the world that I see when I read things like the ESC's work. I mean, where do you see this sort of stuff going? Because it feels to me like this kind of product is quite focused on the idea that there are millions of actors, as you've talked about, but perhaps that isn't where we might be going in the future.
I think I think it's going to be hard to predict the future, and I think what how we deal with that is we deal with principles, and the principles are quite simply, we have a decentralized energy system. It's already here, and it's going to become a more and more, a greater proportion of the energy system, the power flows through the system are going to become more decentralized. I mean, you look at the electric vehicle revolution, it's mostly happening on the distribution network, so the grid edge. And when we look at that as a principle, we cannot see that having a centralized market structure is going to align with that. And I think that's point one. Point two is what we've learned over the last 5 years with Piclo Flex is you can spend countless hours debating what the future structure should look like, and any of these big reforms do require an industry conversation and necessarily take a lot of time. And what is missing in quite often, and this is the space that we've filled, is just getting on with things and actually building tools that can help solve problems now that we think are resilient for the future. And then we can use that as a body of evidence to say, well, actually, we got this bit wrong in our hypothesis, but this bit we underestimated how important this was. And we will, the idea of what Piclo Max is, will evolve as we gather more data. So I think at a principle level, we believe in decentralization, but in terms of what that means in reality, we will evolve and adapt as the industry goes through this transition.
Yeah, I agree with that. Can we go back to, I guess, how this is going to kind of feel and how, say, for example, some of my members as flexibility aggregators might interact with it? I mean, in particular, it would be great to understand, I guess, where Piclo Max kind of ends and where you see the kind of role of aggregators picking up again, I guess, because obviously for my members, it's really important that they're able to compete on the basis of how they remove these barriers so that industrials, domestic, commercial can participate, but also that they're taking their own view about, for example, which markets they want to stack, where the best opportunities are. So presumably all of that would still be left at the discretion of, say, for example, my members, or that's something that you're increasingly wanting to get involved in.
And so it's a great question. Where our position is on this is that we want the choice to be with the actor in the market. So when we think about how this product will work practically, and you think of the level of sophistication between, let's say, various actors in the market, some won't have lots of automation tools or ability to do high volumes of activity at the same time. Our user interface will provide an ecosystem for making the right choice for which market to participate in. So avail the options that are there between the markets that are on offer and allow them to still make that choice. For the more sophisticated of actors and the aggregators and the like of optimization engines, for example, they'll be able to automate access into our ecosystem, but still have the choice to participate around which market or which value is best for them themselves. What we do see, the way this is evolving, is that, of course, there may be more need for integration with tools or sophisticated actors as things evolve. So, again, the folks at the less sophisticated end of the spectrum may need the help of aggregators or optimization engines or other products that help them make those choices. And we're very much open to explore how those partnerships could work and integrate into what we're doing. But as it stands, the choice needs to be with the participant themselves.
Okay, nice. I mean, it does strike me, if you get this right and it all goes pretty well over the next few years, you're going to have access to probably one of the best kind of collections of data that we've got in the sector about who's participating, how people are participating, the trends that we're seeing in different markets. That puts you in quite a powerful position, to have that level of data. What do you think you're going to do with that?
Well, I think the thing to recognise is, first of all, whose data is it, and I think the thing that we recognise, we already have a lot of data flowing through our system. We have 16 going on 17 gigawatts of assets registered, which we think is probably the most comprehensive, UK-wide DER asset register out there. The data belongs to the participants that register on the platform, and they decide how they use that data, whether they're going to use that to bid in and qualify, take part in different things. So that's very much the attitude we have with data is if people are putting in their data into a system to deliver them a service, they are in control of what that does, and our role basically is making use of that data to deliver value pockets to the different providers that they want that to happen. So yeah, I think the other kind of key point is there will, come back to original, what we're talking about, the off-gem flexibility digital infrastructure. We do believe there will be aspects of common data systems that we will ultimately plug into that will help unlock these markets even further. We don't quite know what that level is or what that interface is going to be. Could be around the asset data on the flex asset data. It could be around which permission levels for different different qualified actors. There's a number of different routes that this could take, and some of that data might actually exist in a canonical form, in a system owned by the industry. And we would interface with that. So it's all going to evolve, and I think as long as we have the right attitude to how we work with this data, I think that's the right approach.
If I may, the other thing I think that's really important from our perspective is we want to furnish the industry with those insights from that data and support the market dynamics and the evolution of the market. So as you mentioned, if everything goes well, we'll have an excellent store of data and insight into what's happening in these markets. And that really can support the influence of how markets develop, and being really transparent about that is one of our core principles.
Nice, okay.
And yeah, so just one final point. We have our open data portal already on the platform, so that will plug into Piclo Max as well to provide access, because again, it's all about transparency. If the marketplaces only work if they surface up where value is, and you can then look at, what decisions do I need to make based on the history of data I can see to optimize investment decisions, operational decisions. That's the kind of key principle of an open marketplace.
Yeah, I'm with you. So we talked a bit about the kind of flexibility aggregator side and people providing this service. Should we talk a little bit about what this means for the system operators that you work with? I mean, in particular, I'm thinking about the electricity system operator in some respects has already recognised that this is a problem, right? They've been doing lots of work over the last few years to bring everything into their common platform. I mean, where do you see that in relation to this piece of work? Is that sort of I don't know, slightly trying to go beyond what the ESO is doing, or how do you see it?
So the way that we think about how our existing offering is going to evolve in the UK market is think about all the different system operators as having their own market platforms of various different types, and in some cases the ESO actually has multiple market platforms, of which one is run by Piclo, the local constraint market, but there's a number of others. And they're consolidating some of those other ones into the single markets platform. Each of the DNOs has their own platform. Again, some of them are run by Piclo, some of them are run by third parties. That's the way to think about this. You've got this sort of, and then we have on the provider side, we have a whole series of different flex providers that have their own platforms for managing their own assets as well, optimization platforms, etc. So you have a tapestry of different platforms. We still think these will exist in this future vision. We will simply integrate with all of them. Ideally via API, and ideally in the same format. And again, this is the role that we think the market facilitator can help push forward, is interoperability standards for all these different market platforms, so that it's easier for us to connect in with all of them. So that's how we think about all these different platforms. There will be multiple of them, and Max is all about integrating with them. In some cases, it will integrate with Piclo Flex, because we are one of those market platforms. In some cases, it will integrate with another party's platform.
The other thing to say is I really think this will be complementary to the thinking of ESO or the DSOs or DNOs. And the reason for that, of course, is about incentive alignment or objective alignment. We want the maximum participation in those competitions or procurement events, and then ultimately the optimum price, as I mentioned, that comes out of that for the end consumer. And so what Piclo brings to the table, and what Piclo Max brings to the table, is our 60,000 registered assets and our 16, 17 gigawatts of assets on the platform, availing that to these markets to help create a really liquid market, and so that participation in competition increases. So hopefully all of those outcomes at the end are enhanced.
Nice. So we've talked a lot about the domestic GB context, right, and how this is going to fit in with all of the changes that are happening in the UK at the minute. But perhaps should we talk a little bit more internationally, because what is happening in GB is, in different ways, is kind of being mirrored. At least the challenges and how people are responding to them is being mirrored elsewhere. Do you want to say a little bit, I guess, about how you see this in other countries, whether you see actually this has the same application, whether there are things we can learn in GB for how we take this kind of thing forward?
Absolutely. I think the first thing to say is we see, in terms of an overall flex market, the UK and GB in particular is quite further advanced than most other markets. So this makes sense, as we evolve our offering into this Max and Flex split, that we develop this out in the UK context. A lot of our other markets are where the UK was 4 or 5 years ago, where distribution network operators are going, right, well, we need now to start procuring Flex, and we need to run procurement programs, and we need to start seeing if this works, and convincing all the stakeholders internally, and and Flex providers going, oh, what's this? Like this local flexibility, I need to learn more about it and take part and try, and it's we broadly calling this sort of the incubation phase, which can last a few years. That's where we see a lot of our other markets. We're operating across 6 different countries, but I think ultimately, once you get to sort of critical mass of flex provision, of need from different markets, we see the proposition that we're developed here with the Max product and Flex sitting alongside that as being the natural evolution. So our vision, and this is baked into our design of the platform, is this will be able to connect into and provide access to every energy and flexibility market worldwide. That is the bold vision. I mean, we're a mission-driven company. Our mission is to decarbonize the world's grids. So we've got to have a bold vision here. And so how do we do that is then the next obvious question. And we believe that by focusing on this sort of common toolkit of different services that are essentially market agnostic, that's the way to think about it. So if we can design this for DNOs, for wholesale, for balancing mechanism, for the ESO services in the UK, then why can't we do that for the equivalent selection in any other country as well? So that's our bold vision for this.
Okay. And I think it's really elegant, right? We are the advent of our product was around demand creation or market creation, the Flex product, and going into markets and help set up these local Flex competitions. And we still are going to continue to do this around the globe, and we really are excited to do that. The next phase of market evolution, as James is describing, is about then supply creation or competition creation. And the Max platform helps to bring that competition to multiple markets.
Nice, okay. I mean, what's interesting, I guess, is I feel like you said, GB is kind of where you want to incubate this and where you feel kind of perhaps we're further forward than some markets. But we also know, right, that, we make lots of mistakes and we're kind of all feeling our way forward here. Is there any bits in terms of the other markets that you see that actually think, in this respect, they are actually a little bit further forward than GB is at this point, and perhaps it's something that we can kind of reflect on in the next few years?
That's an interesting question. I would say there are some obvious ones, like we got smart metering wrong in the UK. Other countries, we have single API access to access all residential smart meters because it's managed by the network operator. That I think pretty obvious. Everyone feels the pain here about that. I would say, actually, the key thing at the principle level that we've got right in the UK is the real regulation, so the incentive, the TOTEX-based incentive for network operators, rather than just CapEx, so just incentivizing to build more grids. You can have a smarter approach and take a benefit from that. That is the right approach, and we're having discussions with multiple regulators globally about how they can copy the best bits of this and not copy the harder bits. So the challenge is the challenge with the UK is the regulation of our networks is so complex, and in that complexity, sometimes you have forces fighting against each other. So you have an incentive which incentivizes this sort of thing, but then this other incentive then disincentivizes it. Because of the complexity, it's hard for a single person or someone to kind of bring it all together, which would be my only complaint about the UK system is actually the complexity of it. The principles are right. And I think other countries are going to adopt the same principles, and I hope they do it in a more simplified way. But I would say broadly, the UK is doing a lot of things right, and there's a lot of good things that can be taken from here.
Yeah. I mean, on that, should we dig a little bit more into the very small scale and how you see that developing? I mean, I think it's fascinating what we've seen through the demand flexibility service. We've seen very small companies get involved who are quite specialist, actually, at looking, for example, about how you back off octopus tariffs or similar suppliers into a kind of smaller scale consumer offer. But they're quite small at the minute, and I guess we'll see how that develops. But how do you see it? I mean, do you think the main people who are going to be using this are on the very small scale? Do you think that the kind of larger aggregators will actually see this as something that largely they've now built the kind of tools and the platforms to manage?
That's a great question. I think it's going to be a mix, but ideally the ecosystem ends up being something that's simple for everyone to use, no matter how big or small you are. So definitely there's demand from the folks who are smaller, who are sort of less sophisticated, and they don't have the tooling or, frankly, the time to be able to interface with all these different markets or the different languages that it requires to access them. And so bringing that together and simplifying it is really important, and really important for driving that activity in the market, but also in terms of overall participation and then offers into consumers. I think for the likes of Octopus and the big players in the sector, The question is how easy it remains to be to access things as it continues to evolve. And we'd like to help take that burden off people's hands. So that's the way we're sort of thinking about it. If there's an access constraint or a friction, we want to try to eliminate that. And so hopefully it's complementary to what those folks do, and potentially even is their route to market.
I'm having massive flashbacks to, I don't know if you know, a few years ago where we tried to do MPAN splitting at domestic level, if you remember that, which is effectively a way of creating greater competition at domestic level, where you could have actually the flexibility provision, something that could be competed on, even if you wanted to stay with your existing supplier. I mean, it does strike me that your product would benefit from that sort of arrangement coming forward in the future, even if it is deeply controversial in the market. What do you think about that?
I agree. I think, again, looking at principles, we're all for increased competition, because ultimately it's about, we think when there's more competition, there's going to be more flex, which is going to be offered. There's going to be more satisfied buyers, so they have better prices. That is the thing we're driving for. Anything which supports that is something that we're for. Now, clearly, if you got into the details of particular code changes and reforms, and there might be other reasons why these things one is controversial versus the other, but the principle is, again, how we are. And I think the other thing is, ultimately we are a customer-obsessed organisation, so our customers, being the flex providers, will do what they want us, what markets to access, what services they want. This is how we'll make decisions, rather than just having a random viewpoint on what we think makes sense as well. Well, thank you so much for moderating today.
Yeah,
thank you.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. I hope we've covered huge amounts today in terms of what this means for flexibility service providers who may already be working with Piclo, for those who might just start to work with Piclo, and also I think what it means in terms of Piclo's stake in the market and where you see the electricity markets, not only in GB but internationally, developing. I think what I have taken from this the most, I think, is building things as we go now that we can get on with, but remain agnostic to the huge changes and uncertainty that we have at the minute, is the right way forward. And I hope that it's a great success.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.